Hello, everyone. So the animation we're going to be working on this week features the solar system, and it's the same one that we built at the beginning of the semester, last semester, when we were learning about the basics of objects and, their what's the word I'm looking for? Their transform information over here, translate, rotate, scale, all that stuff. So it's the same thing. I have added on some procedurally generated textures so that we can see if these things are spinning. So we'll know if this thing is rotating. All right, but what I want to talk to you about in this video is groups and their pivot points, because this is already set up mostly with what you need. There's a few of these outer planets that their moons do not have what they need, or actually even Mars doesn't have it, but Earth does. But you can see here in the outliner, this does not look like you would necessarily expect. We can see the sun is set up as the sun, as is one last planet, which does not have its stuff on it yet. That's for you to do later. But you can see here that these all say Mercury orbit, Venus orbit, Saturn orbit. What the heck is going on? So if we go to Earth, which is completely finished, you'll see that when I click on it, it says Earth orbit, and the pivot point is in the middle of the sun. And if you look at this symbol, this is not the usual symbol. This is what geometry looks like. So what the heck is this? That's a group. Well, really, it's just a transform node. This node right here is just transform node. But a group is a transform node with no shape attached to it. It's just this information of translate, rotate, scale, etc., with no actual shape, as opposed to Earth, which definitely has a shape node underneath it. I actually want to turn off shapes. There we go. So we have Earth orbit, which is a group that holds Earth, and also the moon's orbit. So you can see here, I select moon's orbit, and then the moon gets selected, but its pivot point is over here. Like, what the heck? But if I click this little plus sign, I called it Luna because there's lots of moons everywhere. This is now selected. So what on earth is going on here? What are we looking at? Well, we're looking at a bit of a hierarchy, and we are looking at a very, very common situation involved in animation, which is you create a group or a locator or some other kind of node so that you can have a pivot point for a thing off the thing. We can have a pivot point for Earth in the center of the sun, while also still having one on Earth, right? Because if we want to show the Earth rotating, like the Earth rotates on its axis, then we need to be able to do this. We need a pivot point here. However, if we want to show the Earth orbiting around the sun, you're going to need another pivot point in the middle of the sun. One that isn't for the sun itself, because the sun itself will, of course, be spinning around, but also because Venus also needs to orbit around the sun, as does Mercury. Needs to orbit around the sun. So what the heck is going on here? So I've left the one planet without a group, so that you could kind of do it yourself. And there's also some moons that are not grouped to their planets, so you can do that later. Well, let's find this planet. All the way, yeah, there we go. So Uranus. It has this rotation on it, and we would use it to do the planet itself spinning on its axis. So how to get it to have a pivot point also over here? Well, for all these cases, we're grouping things to themselves. Now, normally we think of a group, we're like, I'm going to take a lot of stuff and I'm going to group it all together. And like, yes, but also it's very powerful to group something to itself. You create a new node. And a better way to see that, Outliner is great for selecting things, but a more solid way of seeing that is under General Editor's Hypergraph Hierarchy. We are dealing with the hierarchy in this case. And you can see, oh, for heaven's sake. Let's try this again. There we go. This is all the stuff that's in here And you can see each of these things has a hierarchy. The Earth, or sorry, you get the Moon, is attached to a group called Moon Orbit, which is the same as the Earth, and both are underneath Earth orbit. Venus is only grouped to itself. Mercury is only grouped to itself. Jupiter has 1, 2, 3, 4 moons. It actually has a lot more, but I only included the 4 big ones, which each have their own group that allows them to rotate around Jupiter. Jupiter itself and these 4 moon orbits are located under this whole group orbit for the planet Neptune and its system, or Jupiter and its system. Sorry, I was looking at this. So when you group something to itself, if I click this and I say Control G, well, it throws it all the way over here, which is super helpful. But you can see what it did. It made it the same as the rest of these. It took the shape, which does have its own transform node, and it put it under a new transform node that has its own information, including its own name. So the planet right here, with its information, it's scaled at 0.7. It's been translated a certain ways away. That's why they're all scattered. Group 1 is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Now we're going to retitle this Uranus Orbit, which I spelled wrong, so we're going to fix that. And I'm keeping this all one word, always one word, no spaces. If you really need an underscore, use an underscore. But you can't have any spaces. It's gonna put an underscore in on your behalf. I name things with the lowercase at the start, and it's called camel hump. So it's like lowercase, and then the next word is uppercase for the one letter, and then lowercase for the rest of it. As long as you do something that makes sense for you, do that. As long as you can read it, do that, but it has to have no spaces. All right, so it made a pivot point. And now we're lucky because by default, under the settings, it puts the group pivot at the origin, which is where the sun is, conveniently. But what if that's not the case? Right, so we've set up this planet perfectly well. It's got an orbit, a group orbit right there. I can get to it by hitting up on the keyboard. So if you select a planet and you're like, oh, but I actually need its group orbit, hit up on the keyboard and you get its orbit, and then you're able to have it orbit around the sun. But what about a situation where we don't have something at the origin point? So here I have something where I don't want the group pivot point to go to the origin. Quite the opposite. I want it to be somewhere around here. So I can change my settings for the group to center instead. Close that up. And I'm going to, let me see how I set this up for the others. I just want to make sure I do this the correct way. The moon under the thing. Got it. So each moon gets its own group. So Control G for that. Oh, did it not listen to my settings? Sometimes these things do not listen to our settings. Boo. So we're going to undo group. I'm looking over here in my script editor, like my script line, to see what it is I undid. And then I go here. Apparently I have to actually group it to have it, save these settings. And so I say group. It does that there. And now when I hit this one, I hit Control G. It'll remember that the pivot point needs to be there. So that's step one. I group these to themselves. And they should, yep, they are showing up underneath the Mars orbit. So when I grouped them to themselves, they remained in the same part of the hierarchy. Now I do need to rename them because group 1 and group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5, that's insane. So this is Phobos. So I hit up on the keyboard to get its group, and I say Phobos group. This is Deimos. So Deimos group. So I rename them. So step 1 is to actually group them with their pivot points basically staying where they are. Step 2, name the group. Or actually, I called them group. I should be calling them orbit. But as long as you know what they are, you're fine. Up gets you to the group. Might as well make it consistent. Step 3 is to move the pivot point. And I showed that briefly before, but we'll show it here again. I'm hitting the space bar to go to my top view. Zooming in, because I like being zoomed in. And I'm going to hit insert on the keyboard. And this, well, I have my move tool open. I should specify the move tool is open. And this, no. I'll use the arrows. Always safer to just use the arrows. You can see I can move this and I can kind of zoom in, get this to go to the right spot. I can also kind of line up these axes on the sphere. There we go. See the red and blue axes. It's a little bit hard to see probably on your video, but I've got it lined up there. And so now it's at the center of the planet. And I can do the same thing here. Select the moon, hit up on the keyboard. Just kidding. Phobos orbit. There we go. I hit it twice. Insert. Move this here. Zoom in to make sure I'm actually getting it centered. Big difference between centered and off of center if you're working with computers like this, for sure. All right, and then the last step is to hit insert again because you want to like get out of that pivot point mode and then test it. Just see like, does this go where it's supposed to? The answer is yes. If I click this, hit up on the keyboard. Oh, yikes, I messed something up. So oh no, I didn't. Oh, I accidentally, I must have had the wrong thing selected. These things happen. That one's where it's supposed to be. Cool. This one I must have accidentally like snapped over there, and the reason I'm thinking that is something went funny when I was moving it. I just thought it behaved really weirdly, and the reason it's hard to tell is because you can't see a group. Groups are invisible, so this is a good lesson in like, things happen, so you just go and you fix it. Just move it back to where it was. Is it frustrating? Yeah, but whatever. There we go. Zoom out again, and then I hit insert before I click anything else. I hit insert to get out of that mode, and you can tell you're in the right mode because I'm hitting these buttons and I'm getting my regular manipulators, and I can do this, and all is right with the world. It's behaving the way it should. It has moved up. I don't like that for us. So you can go to the front view or a side view. And see how it's like above the main axis? Don't like that. There we go. That's better. And I'm always looking at my channel box. That's the only way to know. Oh, I did it again. When I see how my mouse says align, it's asking me if I want to align the pivot point with this item. So I click off of insert. I hit that again to get my regular tool. Then I click this, tells me I'm the moon. I hit up on my keyboard, then it tells me on the orbit, and then I can check this orbit. So that's why it moved, is because I accidentally like triggered a whole like alignment scenario. But it's a good lesson in making sure you change your tool back to what you're using, and also making sure you're paying attention to whether you are on the moon or the planet or its orbit group. Because as we're going through and animating this, so let me find something that does not have, there we go, Venus does not have any moons, so it's a little bit easier. I'm going to say focus in on Venus with the F key. And in animating this, I need to do two separate things. I need to have it spin on its own axis, but also rotate or orbit around the sun. Now, before I do that, well, first of all, I'm going to hit save. Animation start 2. I just don't want to mess up the file for class. Because we did some work, we want to save. And as I said in earlier videos, we need to make sure our preferences for this assignment for the animation has linear tangents. Now, it remembered it for me, but make sure that you go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, Animation, under here, under Settings, and then you see tangents, and they say default in and out tangents. Set them to linear. We don't want them to be slowing up or slowing down or speeding up. We want everything to be a constant speed for this assignment. There might be a couple other times where we do, but this assignment is a little bit of an exception because we're making the planets don't slow down. that's it's that's not a thing. So we need to make sure we've set this up properly. So I hit save. I just check that before I start animating. All right. So we're going to put this into action. Why do we have groups when we already have rotations on this? Well, because I'm going to grab my rotate tool. And like always, I'm going to look down here, make sure my time marker is correct, make sure this is where I want it to, and then this is rotate Y. It's pretty much what you're going to be rotating everything in here on is rotate Y. Key selected. And that will start it off. And then I can go to, how many times do I want this to go around? I'm going to go to frame 240, all the way to the end. And we're going to put it at, let's see, 360, 720, 1080. It's 3 times around. It's going to rotate 3 times. So I changed my time marker. I changed the number over here, right click, key selected. Then I click off it so I can watch it. Oh, it's not actually rotating as much as I thought it would be. 240 frames is much longer than I would have expected. No speeding up, no slowing down. Always love to see that. So that worked out well. Now how do we get it to rotate around this? Well, that's why we made the group, because this rotation already has information on it. I can't move this particular pivot point somewhere else. I need it to do this. So I select Venus, I hit up on the keyboard, and I get its orbit group. And now I can do the same thing with the orbit group. I can go to this right here, rotate Y, key selected, go to the end, rotate Y, set it to 720. I'm making up numbers here. I don't know how fast Venus goes around. Right click, key selected. And then we'll see how fast that goes. Oh, not nearly as fast as I thought. All right. Cool, cool, cool. Or I might actually up that to 1080 because I want Mercury to be even faster and then, Venus to be even, others to have more room to be slower. I make a change, 1080. I make sure I'm on the right keyframe when I do it, and I have to rekey it because I made a change. And now that'll go even faster. And I'm going to stop it and unselect it so I can see it spinning. You probably can't see it spinning at the speed it's going at, but you know it's spinning. All right, so that the planet itself is rotating, right? The planet itself is rotating on its axis, but also it's orbiting the sun. And you need 2 different pivot points to do it, which is why we have this, A and B. They both have keys. And that's what you would need to keep track of to do this assignment. So the assignment this week, and we're going to have time in class to ask questions and then go over some other things. The assignment this week is to get this moving, right? To animate the solar system, to set it up so that each of these planets is rotating unto itself and also orbiting around the sun. If you want the moons to rotate around the planets, well, it's the same idea. Select a moon, hit up on the keyboard. There you go. Hit up on the keyboard to get the group. Go to the beginning, rotate Y, key selected, go to the end. Do the math on how many times it's going to go around. 360 for once, 270 for twice, 1080 for 3 times. After that, find a calculator. So the moon will orbit the Earth. Separately, I can tell the Earth to spin on its axis. 720. And separately from that, I select the Earth. I hit up on the keyboard. I don't even need to really interact with this manipulator. I just need the numbers up here. Earth orbit. I'm watching the name on the channel box to ensure I'm changing the correct thing, Earth orbit, right click, key selected, then I go over here, 720, key selected. And now the moon will orbit the Earth as the Earth orbits the sun. And I'm already regretting not figuring out what 4 times around is because I want the moon to move more faster. Yes, that is proper grammar. Let's see, 4 times 360 equals 1440, which is also, you notice how a lot of these numbers are, for some reason, numbers for resolutions on TVs and monitors and stuff. I don't know why that is. Nope, that's not what I want to change. Let's see, the moon itself, its orbit, there it is, 1440, key selected. Let's see how this looks. Could probably go even faster if you want. One of the things you don't want is things to look like they're not actually rotating around or orbiting around. You'll notice that Venus and the Earth are going at 2 different speeds, which is, likely. Also, they start off differently. I've done you the favor of starting off your planets not all on a line, right? They've all been moved so that you don't have to, it's not gonna be boring. They're not gonna be in a line. There's nothing you can do to put them in a line unless you want to undo all that work. What we need to understand is that we need multiple pivot points even for the same object if you want it to both spin on its own axis and orbit around something. Using groups like this, very common in rigs. This is just a thing that happens all the time. We want to notice that these hierarchies, they're not cyclical. You can't make the moon the parent of the Earth orbit. It's not possible. And we also want to learn that the children, the thing that are underneath here, they can do whatever they want and this doesn't get affected. If the Earth orbit changes, whether like this or like this, everything else follows. But the Earth can do whatever it wants on its own. The moon orbit doesn't affect the Earth or this, but it does affect the moon because the moon is underneath it. These things don't change. So the child can run circles around, parents don't do anything. And then if the parent moves, the other things have to follow. Conversely, if we go to the Earth orbit and make a change over here, and we say, translate Z moved, there's no numbers there. If you go to the Earth, there's no numbers there for translate Z. If you go to the moon orbit, there's no numbers there for translate Z. It allows the children to move without putting any numbers on their transforms, which will be important in its own right with a lot of stuff that you're doing. All right, so this is what we're going to be doing this week. We're going to be animating this. The things you want to understand coming out of both this video and this assignment will be how to group things to themselves, which is just Control G, how to move the pivot point to various locations that are necessary, which is you hit the insert key, which changes what the manipulator looks like. You move it to where you need to go, then you hit the insert key again to get out of that. And how you can then put this into practice. And the practice here, I know it might seem a little bit tedious. There's a lot of stuff to look at. You really need to learn to pay attention to what is up here. Because at least right now, you're like, oh, that's Mars, that's obvious. That's the sun, that's Saturn, that's obvious. Already with this assignment, it's not obvious because you need to be dealing with Saturn orbit, not Saturn itself a lot of the time. And when we get to other rigs and other scenarios, it will be very unobvious what it is you're selecting unless you know the name of the thing and what it applies to, what it does. You need to understand conceptually what it is that you have selected and know that this is the thing I'm selecting to have it rotate on its axis. Hit up on the keyboard. This group is what I'm selecting to have this planet orbit around the sun. So we want to train ourselves early on to pay lots and lots and lots of attention to either your channel box or your outliner. Maybe have both up. So whatever thing you have selected will be on here, and you'll be able to select things in here easily as well. It's a very visual selection tool. but this is what you're keying. So it's like always take a glance at this. Is this the thing I want to be keying? Is this the thing I want to change? So those are the major categories of things we're working on this week. Please let me know if you have any questions that you think need answering before class. Otherwise, I will see you all in class next time.